This is The Greenhouse Keeper's Guide to Magical Gardening by Camilla Vavrouche. Chapter 1. In which a royal botanist arrives in a village that has clearly given up on February.
The first and most essential tool of any greenhouse keeper is not the trowel, nor the watering can, nor even a good pair of gloves. It is the willingness to begin. The Greenhouse Keeper's Guide to Magical Gardening.
Asha Merrick stood ankle-deep in a puddle that had ambitions of being a pond. Her coat clung to her, and her boots squelched in a manner unbefitting a woman with royal credentials, even if said credentials had recently been questioned in a spectacular and unusually botanical scandal, and it was another round of getting kicked out of what she'd considered home. The cart that had deposited her here was already a sound in the distance, its driver unbothered by the fact that he had left her standing in the rain. So now she stood here, rapidly going from dry to wet to the bone, at the edge of what was generously being called the village square, though it was more of a lopsided triangle that had clearly given up on geometry. So this was Alderwyck. Asha had formed no particular expectations of Alderwyck, which she was now grateful for, because reality would have demolished most of them. The village emerged from the February drizzle in shades of gray and faded brown, thatched rooftops sagging under the season's final insults, stone walls gone dark with wet, smoke tiredly curling from chimneys. Everything looked painted in watercolor and left out in the rain until it bled at the edges. Still alive, she thought, but not much more. The triangle that passed for a square was bounded on two sides by buildings, and on the third by a low stone wall, beyond which a dirt road curved away into the gray. A bakery sat at one corner, warm light pressing against its small windows. A general store occupied another, shuttered for the afternoon with the look of somewhere that opened on its own schedule and not anyone else's. And at the third point of the triangle, what had to be a forge, its chimney breathing steady smoke into the sky, the ring of metal on metal having gone quiet sometime in the last few wet minutes, leaving only the hiss of rain on stone. A well sat at the rough center of it all, its rope dark, ice crusting the edges of the buckets beside it. Between the buildings, she could see other structures further back, houses huddled together as if for warmth. A larger building that might have been a meeting hall, a woodworking shop by the looks of the weathered sign. The village had the stillness of a place where sensible people stayed indoors, and she was outdoors and not. Snow lingered in the shadows where the buildings blocked the weak winter sun, thin crusts of it along the base of the stone wall, a stubborn white drift tucked against the well's foundation. The temperature sat somewhere just at freezing, indecisive cold wobbling between snow and rain and doing both inadequately. The puddle she was standing in had a faint skin of ice at its edges that her boots had broken through on arrival. She adjusted her satchel strap and took mental stock of what she had. Botanical tools. A pouch of money. 4 changes of clothes. A bottle of restorative tonic, which would last her 2 months. A carefully oilcloth-wrapped packet of her personal seeds, the ones she'd been collecting since she was a girl, tucked into the deepest interior pocket where nothing could reach them. A second packet, this one containing heirloom seeds she'd acquired through years of careful trading, wrapped with equal care. And a sealed letter from the palace, which she had not yet opened, because some things were better faced after one had, at minimum, found a roof over one's head. She was here to tend the village greenhouse, which would probably turn out to be some long-forgotten shed-like building with no hope of growing anything. It was a punishment, after all. If there was more to it, the letter would tell her, presumably, once she'd found somewhere to read it that wasn't actively precipitating. The hairs on her neck stood up, an intense feeling of being watched. She turned. In the doorway of the forge stood a figure. A silhouette, really. Tall, still, arms crossed against the cold or against the world, or both. though the forged light behind the figure made it impossible to make out the person's face through the drizzle. She could imagine narrowed eyes at the stranger arriving in their town. A gust of wind drove rain into Asha's eyes, and when she looked again, the doorway was empty, the door closing. She blinked, shook water from her lashes. A cat crossed the square in front of her. Red, a deep, almost autumnal red, with the deliberate, unhurried stride of a creature that had decided long ago that urgency was beneath it. It stopped, turned its head and regarded her with green eyes. Asha had the distinct impression of being assessed, weighed, and found wanting, all in the space of 3 seconds. Then the cat looked away, as if she'd already ceased to be interesting, and continued across the square with its tail held high despite the rain.
Wonderful,
Asha mumbled.
even the cat.
She pushed her brown, wet hair out of her face, hitched her satchel higher, and headed for the bakery. Because it had warm light in the windows, and she was cold enough to make poor decisions about priorities. The door opened before she could knock. The woman on the other side was small and bright-eyed. Red curls escaped in every direction from a knot at the back of her head. There was flour on her jaw and hands, and she was already smiling as though a stranger at the door were an occasion rather than an inconvenience.
Oh,
She said, taking in Asha's general state of waterlogged misery with an expression of cheerful sympathy.
you poor thing.
She continued, as though Asha was a child and she was an adult, when she was most likely a few years younger than Asha.
Come in, come in. Don't stand there. The weather's dreadful, and you look like you've been wrung out and hung up to dry. Except not the dry part.
She was already stepping back, already making space, already welcoming before Asha had managed a single word.
I'm Lilbet Fernridge. Come in.
Asha came in, because it had been the point of coming over after all. The bakery was everything the square outside was not. Warm and cozy and fragrant with bread and something faintly sweet. Dried herbs hanging from the rafters in soft bundles, a fire going with cheerful seriousness in the grate. Asha's hands unclenched around her satchel strap without her deciding to.
Sit.
Lilbet said, already moving toward the fire.
I'll get you something hot. Tea? I have chamomile, and I have something I call whatever was left, which is actually quite good. Are you hungry? I have bread from this morning. It's not the freshest, but I have butter, and I have a pot of soup that there's plenty of.
Tea would be lovely, Asha managed.
Tea, then, and I'll bring the bread anyway.
Lilbet said this as though it were already settled.
Now, who are you, and what on earth brings anyone to Alderwyck in February?
Asha Merrick. She settled onto the stool nearest the fire and tried not to visibly steam.
I've been sent from the capital. I'm the new greenhouse keeper.
Lilbet turned from the kettle. Her expression was warm, but something shifted in it. Briefly, just a flicker, like a candle in a draft.
The greenhouse,
She said.
our greenhouse.
You do still have one? Asha asked. I was told it exists,
Oh, it exists.
Lilbet said, more like she was confirming that a wound still bled.
I won't say it's in good condition, mind. It's been empty a long while. 15 years, near enough.
She set the kettle over the fire and turned back.
I should warn you, it's not much to look at now. Some of the glass is gone. The frame...
She trailed off and made a small, uncertain gesture.
Wren would know better than me. Or Garrick, maybe. Though I don't think he's been in there since I was little.
Asha absorbed this. I see, she said, though she had no idea what she was supposed to see.
You're not what I'd expect.
Lilbet said, with the directness of someone who had decided honesty was more useful than tact in this situation.
You know, of a greenhouse keeper.
I didn't think you'd have expectations.
Well, I didn't. But, you know, the mind works fast. I would have thought that a greenhouse keeper from the capital would be older, maybe? More official looking?
Lilbet glanced at Asha's dripping coat.
Perhaps someone with an umbrella.
I had one, Asha said. The cart hit a rut outside the Hollow Bridge junction. It went into a ditch, and the driver was in a hurry. Lilbet laughed, short and genuine, and some of the flickering wariness settled. She brought the mug over and set it in front of Asha, then fetched a thick slice of dark rye and a crock of butter and placed those alongside it without asking. The bread was dense and good, the butter lightly salted, and Asha ate too fast because she hadn't eaten anything since early morning.
So the capital sent you,
Lilbet said, settling on the other side of the counter. It wasn't quite a question. They did. Asha wrapped both hands around the mug. I made a mistake, and apparently this is the consequence.
Always good for a village to be known as a punishment,
Lilbet said, sounding cheerful but with a sharpness underneath. I've been given the greenhouse and a task, Asha said. Once it's done, I'll leave.
How long?
A season, maybe less if things go well. I don't intend to overstay. She'd rather not have come at all, but that would be rude to say to a local. Lilbet looked at her with an expression Asha couldn't read. Then she pulled a small piece of bread from the loaf for herself and said, quite mildly,
Well, expect to be the center of attention for a while. The capital hasn't sent anyone to Alderwyck in a long time. Not for something like this.
No? Asha asked, though her curiosity piqued, because it sounded like the capital had sent someone to this forgotten place for another reason.
No.
A beat, and then carefully, like she was choosing where to place her feet.
We've mostly managed on our own.
There was more in that than Lilbet seemed inclined to say, and Asha didn't press. She'd only been in Alderwyck for 20 minutes and was still largely a puddle in a coat. Learning the shape of things would take longer than that, and it wasn't like it mattered since she didn't intend to stay. Fulfill whatever was in the letter and then return home to where there were more people than trees. What do you know about the greenhouse? Asha asked. Is it salvageable? Lilbet's expression did something complicated, caught somewhere between optimism and honesty.
I'm sure it is,
she said, in a tone that said she wasn't.
It's been empty a while, mind. 15 years, give or take. So you'll have your work cut out for you.
A pause.
Quite a lot of work, actually.
How much is quite a lot? Lilbet smiled, bright and evasive in equal measure.
Enough to keep you busy.
Wonderful. Asha turned her mug in her hands, sent to the edge of the kingdom to restore a greenhouse that hadn't been touched in 15 years. Not as a punishment, they'd told her, but as an opportunity. She was beginning to feel the distinction was academic. Could you tell me where it is? She asked. Lilbet smiled and nodded.
Nothing around here is far. Well, except cities and the like. Those are far. But to get to the greenhouse, or what's left of it, you go past the forge, head for the big oak, then continue down the path and you'll see it.
Asha stored the information away. She rolled her shoulders, stiff after the long journey. And is there somewhere I can stay? I'll need a room. Something long-term.
The capital didn't set you up?
Asha snorted. Hardly.
There are a few abandoned houses,
Lilbet said.
but they'll require work before they're livable. For now, I'd say Garrick Home is your best bet. He has the room above his carpentry shop to let. It's clean and dry, and he charges fairly.
She paused.
He doesn't say much. Don't take it personally. He's that way with everyone, not just strangers.
I won't, Asha said, though she filed the warning where it belonged. The rain had eased to a fine mist by the time she rose to leave. Lilbet walked her to the bakery door and pointed out the carpentry shop, the one Asha had noted before, with the sign creaking in the wind.
Come by in the morning,
Lilbet said.
The bread is best early, and I always keep the prices as low as I can.
I'll come, Asha said. And I'll pay what the bread's worth. At least her funds, after several years as a court botanist with paid food and shelter, were in fairly good shape. Lilbet pressed a bread roll into her hands before she went, as though bread rolls at parting were simply good sense. And then she was back inside, warm light spilling briefly through the doorway until the door closed. Asha stood in the mist. The forge was quiet, though its chimney still breathed. The well stood patient at the center of the triangle. Snow caught the last of the gray afternoon light where it clung in the shadows, stubborn at the base of the wall. Somewhere above a roofline, something moved. The red cat again, or possibly a different one, settling itself on a fence post and watching her with an intelligence she found unsettling. She had a seed packet, the warmth of tea still in her hands, a lead on a room, and a sealed letter she still hadn't opened. She looked at the village, the smoke from the chimneys, the dark, wet stone, the way the houses leaned together across the narrow gaps between them, like people who had been standing in the cold for a long time and had quietly stopped expecting it to end. 1 season, she thought. Possibly less. She squared her shoulders and started walking.